Hey, so a buddy of mine was asking, how exactly do you do paging in MongoDB? In other words, I have an application and I want to bring back just a certain number of documents, kind of maybe each page of my site. So I want to bring back 5 at a time or 50 at a time and kind of page through that instead of bringing back all the collection. And I talk a lot about these concepts in my new book, MongoDB for Job Seekers. But I thought I'd talk a little bit about them in the context of using MongoDB's extension in Visual Studio Code. So right here I have the extension installed. You can just look it up, MongoDB extension, and you'll get a screen like this to connect to your database, but I've already connected to it, so you can see here my connections, and there's a MongoQuest database because I'm connected to the mongoquest.com database, which I talk about in the book, and you can go visit it right now and play if you want. It's a game where they're interview-like questions for MongoDB to kind of practice your knowledge. So these are the actual questions. So there's 50 of them in these documents. And if I go ahead and look at one of these documents, the extension will show me them in JSON and color code them nicely in Visual Studio Code for me. And you'll see the question, some response data, and a level, because each level of the game kind of gets a little more difficult, and a question number in sequence for the game. So first question, second question, up to 50 or 34 in this case. So that's kind of the documents we'll be working with. So let's start with something pretty straightforward, and that's going to use a find query. So another cool aspect of this extension is anything I name with .mongodb.js at the end of the file becomes an interactable, kind of playable file. So what I wrote here is some JavaScript that can run Node, and it can run this query I just wrote. So if I press this play button up here, then I'll actually get a live connection to the database that I'm already connected to, and we'll run this code against it. So you'll see I got back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 documents here if you look at the question number. So let's talk about how we did that real quick. So this is a pretty simple find command, and we're going to do a find on the questions collection and ask for all of our documents back. And then we're going to sort them by that number field I was talking about. Now, you don't need to use a field like that. You could use a date field you might have, or even the underscore ID if you use an object ID for that, because that actually contains a date inside it. So if you order by the underscore ID, ascending or descending, you'll get back your documents in the order they were created date-wise. And then the next bit here is a skip. So we're going to skip in 5 documents and then limit I want 5 back. So again, if I press play on this, it will connect, and I'll get back, as we talked about, 5 documents, starting with our 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th questions. Now, we can get a little more complicated than that. So next, let's go into how we can do this using the aggregation framework. To do that, I'm going to go into another playground file we made here, and I'm going to make a function this time. So this function is going to be called getPage, and it's going to accept a page number. I'm making this 0-based. You can make it 1-based, however you like to do that. And we're going to do the same operations here, but a little bit differently. So we'll do our sort by our number using the sort operator for this stage of our pipeline for our aggregation query. And the next we'll do skip, but we'll take this page parameter we had and we'll multiply it by 5. So each time we'll skip by that many. So our first page will be 0-based, so we won't skip any, and our second page will skip 5, so it'll be 5, and then 10, and then 15, and etc. And again, we'll limit by 5. So at the end, I'll call this page function, and I'm going to say I want a 3rd page. So if I play that, you'll see this gets me back questions starting at 16, and it'll give me the whole document. And then the last question that we get back here will be the 20th question. So that's pretty helpful and straightforward, but since now we switch to using the aggregation framework, we can get a little more complicated. So in this next example, what we're going to do is again make a function, but now this function is going to accept a level or a page. So by doing this, we're going to use those levels that I talked about in the game. And we're going to switch our first stage in our pipeline to match only that level that we're asking for. Now, the reason that isn't like level like this is in JavaScript, if those are the same, if both the field and the kind of value there are the same, then we could just shorten it to just that. And this time, I actually just want the question text back. I don't want all the rest of the document. So I'm going to use a project stage to just bring back the question. Now, that will bring back the question ID, underscore ID as well. But we could exclude that if we needed to, but we're going to keep it for this purpose. And we're going to use the same sort, skip, and limit here. So we didn't change any of that, but we're going to ask for level 2 questions on page 3 again. So if we go ahead and play that, you'll see we get just the question text back here. And we get 4 though. We only get 4 questions. And that's because once we got to level 2 of this and we paged all the way into the 3rd page, there actually weren't enough questions left to get 5 back, even though we did limit to 5. So we just got 4 back. Now we could take this a step further. So to do that, we're going to take this last bit of a playground. Now this one's a bit more complicated than you probably realistically want to do in your production app, but it kind of shows you your different options and the stuff you can do. So again, we're going to make a function here, and we're going to switch it back to just take the page and be simple. But the first step in our pipeline now, we're going to use something a little different. We're going to use this set window fields. And in this, it's going to basically say, okay, within the window of whatever we are or wherever we are in the pipeline, let's set a field in that context. So since we haven't actually done anything else in this yet, this will be the context of all the documents in our collection. So when I ask for a count here and assign it to a field called total count, that will be a count of all the documents in our collection. But now we have that available to use later, which we will, you'll see. So we'll next have 3 more stages that do the same thing we've been doing all along here, sort, skipping, and limiting. And now for our next stage, we're going to use that set window fields again, but now it's in the window of that sort, skip, and limit. So it's just in the window of those 5 limited documents that we have. And so here we're going to say, oh, I want the document number. So we can use this document number operator, and then I call the field doc number within the sorted by number, again, bit of the window. So that will be like, okay, within this window, documents 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, if you line them up in order, they would have a number like that, and that would be their document number. And we can use that in our next stage of our aggregation. So here we're going to add a new field again, and I just called it result. And I'm going to use add here to add that document number we just had, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, to our page times 5. So that's kind of the page we're on plus whatever document we're on. So that might be 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, or 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Depending on where we are. And we'll see why that's useful in a second. So as our final stage in the pipeline, we'll do a project here, and we'll say, I just want the question back, and I want that result field I just ran. And I'm going to say, I want to start at page 2 when I call this function. So we'll go ahead and run that. And we'll see, now we get the question plus this result that starts at 11 and goes to 15. Now, where we can make that even more useful is I'll go ahead and actually comment out that result, and I'll add this position field. So when I play that, you'll see now we get this position field that's 11 out of 50, and 12 out of 50, and 15 out of 50. So how did we do that? Well, this position field that we added, we used this concat to concat fields together. So that result field we just made, like where we are in our results, we will add together with a delimiter here of a slash, and the total count that we made all the way back here, the total count of documents in our collection. And when we bring these together, we can get an output like that. But do notice this says toString here because both the result and the total count were integers, and we can't take an integer and a string like this and add them together or concat them. So that's why these have a toString on each of them. This is very similar in SQL, if you know that. So again, we can run that, and we'll get 11 out of 50, 12 out of 50. I could go in here and change this slash to something like of, and run that, and now we have 11 out of 50, 12 out of 50. So we could actually pull those fields right back in our results and show them on our client, and we don't need to keep track of those like in a variable in our client to show as we progress through. So I could go back to the very first page, again 0 indexed here, and we would start with the 1 of 50, or I could jump to the third and run that, and now I'll start at 16 out of 50. So hopefully it's some cool tricks, some interesting stuff maybe you didn't know. Make sure to check out the book, MongoDB for Job Seekers, or learnmongo.com for more of this sort of content, and talk to you soon.